The anniversary party was held at the waterfront club, all white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers, with views of the harbor stretching out beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. 200 guests filled the ballroom, celebrating my parents' 25 years of marriage. I sat at a table near the back, wearing a simple navy dress I'd bought on sale 3 years ago. My sister, Amanda, held court at the family table near the front, her designer gown shimmering under the lights. Her husband, Brett, looked appropriately successful in his tailored suit. I'd arrived late and planned to leave early. These family events were always the same, a performance where everyone played their assigned roles. Amanda was the successful daughter. I was the disappointment. The speeches started after dinner. Uncle Richard talked about how he'd introduced my parents at a college party. Mom's best friend shared embarrassing dating stories. Then Dad stood up, tapping his champagne glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. His voice was warm, confident. The voice of a man who'd built a successful accounting practice from nothing. 25 years ago I married the love of my life. Together we built a beautiful family and a good life. Applause rippled through the room. Mom beamed from her seat. "As part of tonight's celebration," Dad continued, "I want to announce some exciting news about our family's future." My stomach tightened. I knew what was coming. "Many of you know about our beach house in Malibu," Dad said. "My father bought it in 1975, and it's been in our family for nearly 50 years. It's where we spent every summer, where our girls learned to swim, where we've made countless memories." Amanda was smiling, her hand clutched in Brett's. She knew what was coming too. "The house is worth approximately $4 million now," Dad continued. "And I'm pleased to announce that we're passing it on to our daughter Amanda and her family." The room erupted in applause. People turned to congratulate Amanda, who stood and hugged both parents. Brett shook Dad's hand enthusiastically. "Amanda has always been responsible," Dad said over the noise. "She's built a successful career, married well, and given us 2 beautiful grandchildren. We know the beach house will be in good hands with her." More applause. Amanda was crying happy tears now, accepting hugs from relatives. No one looked at me. No one even glanced in my direction. I took a sip of water and stayed quiet. The party continued for another 2 hours. I endured congratulatory conversations where people gushed about Amanda's good fortune, endured pointed questions about my own life that were really just opportunities for judgment. "Still working at that bookstore?" Aunt Susan asked. "Still single?" Cousin Jennifer inquired with fake sympathy. "Must be nice having a sister so successful," a family friend said, not realizing how the words stung. I smiled through all of it. Then I slipped out around 10 p.m. while Dad was giving another toast. No one noticed me leave. I drove home to my small apartment in Santa Monica, a 1-bedroom place with outdated fixtures and a view of the parking lot. Or at least that's what my family thought I had. In reality, I lived in a 3-bedroom penthouse I owned in a building I also owned, but they'd never bothered to visit, so they didn't know. Just like they didn't know about the 12 other properties I owned across California, including the Malibu beach house Dad had just promised to Amanda. I'd bought it 6 months ago. The beach house had been in trouble for a while. Dad and Mom barely used it anymore. Too busy with their lives, too expensive to maintain. The property taxes alone were $70,000 a year. Repairs were mounting. The roof needed replacing. The deck was rotting. Dad had mentioned selling it last Thanksgiving. "Too much of a headache," he'd said. "But it breaks my heart to let it go. It's been in the family so long." 2 weeks later, the listing went up quietly through a private broker. Dad didn't tell anyone, didn't want family drama about who might buy it. I saw the listing the day it posted. I'd been tracking that property for 3 years, ever since I'd started building my real estate portfolio seriously. I knew every inch of that house, every memory attached to it. I made an offer the same day, $3.8 million cash, close in 30 days. The broker nearly fell over himself accepting. Dad never knew it was me. The purchase went through an LLC I'd created, Pacific Coast Holdings. No personal names attached. I'd spent the last 6 months and $400,000 renovating it. New roof, new deck, updated kitchen, modern bathrooms. I'd kept all the character. The whitewashed wood walls, the stone fireplace, the window seat where I used to read as a kid. But I'd made it beautiful. Made it profitable too. I'd listed it on luxury rental sites for $12,000 a week. It was booked solid for the next 8 months. My family had no idea. The phone call came at 7:30 Sunday morning. You bitch. Amanda's voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You absolute bitch. I was making coffee in my kitchen, enjoying the Sunday morning quiet. Good morning to you too, Amanda. Don't good morning me. What the hell did you do? I'm not sure what you mean, I said calmly, pouring my coffee. The beach house, she shrieked. I went there this morning to take measurements for new furniture, and there's a security guard at the gate. He wouldn't let me in. He said the property belongs to someone named Mitchell. Ah, I said. Yes, that would be me. Silence. Complete absolute silence. Then, what do you mean that would be you? I bought the beach house 6 months ago, I said, taking a sip of coffee. Dad sold it through a private listing. I made an offer through my LLC. The sale went through in February. That's impossible, Amanda said. Her voice had gone from screaming to dangerous quiet. You don't have that kind of money. You work at a bookstore. I worked at a bookstore 8 years ago while I was saving money, I corrected. I haven't had a job in 6 years. I own 13 properties now, including the Malibu beach house. My portfolio is worth about $19 million. More silence. You're lying, she finally said. Call the security guard back, I suggested. Ask him to confirm the owner's name. Sophia Mitchell. That's me. I heard rustling voices in the background. Amanda must have put me on speaker because suddenly I could hear Brett too. This is insane, he was saying. She can't possibly. The deed is public record, I interrupted. You can look it up online. Search the Malibu County Assessor's database. 2847 Pacific Coast Highway. Owner, Pacific Coast Holdings LLC, registered agent Sophia Mitchell. More silence. Then I heard typing. Oh my God, Brett said. She's not lying. The deed shows. Dad sold you our beach house? Amanda's voice cracked. He sold you our family home? He sold it to the highest bidder through a private broker, I said. He had no idea it was me. I used my business entity to protect my privacy. But he just announced, in front of everyone, that I was getting the house. Yes, I said. That was awkward, wasn't it? Awkward. Amanda was screaming again. He promised it to me. In front of 200 people. He promised you something he didn't own, I said simply. That's not my problem. You have to sell it to us, Brett said. His voice had that lawyer tone, commanding, expecting compliance. Name your price. We'll match what you paid. I paid $3.8 million, I said. I've put another $400,000 into renovations. The property is currently generating $144,000 a year in rental income. Why would I sell? Because it's family. Amanda shouted. Family, I repeated. Right. Like how you're my family. What's that supposed to mean? It means that for the last 10 years, you've treated me like I'm invisible. Like I don't matter. Like I'm some kind of embarrassment you have to tolerate at holidays. That's not. Last Christmas, you introduced me to your in-laws as my sister who hasn't figured out her life yet, I interrupted. At Mom's birthday, you told everyone I was still trying to find myself. At every family event, you make sure everyone knows I'm the failure and you're the success. I never meant. And now Dad just announced in front of 200 people that he's giving you a $4 million property because you're responsible and successful. Meanwhile, I've been quietly building a $19 million real estate portfolio, and no one in this family has ever bothered to ask about my life. Amanda didn't respond. So no, I continued, I won't sell you the beach house. I'm going to keep renting it out to nice families who appreciate it. I'm going to make a profit. And I'm going to enjoy the irony of the situation. Dad is going to be furious, Brett said. At who? I asked. At me for buying a house that was legally for sale? Or at himself for promising something he no longer owned? I heard muffled voices. They were arguing with each other now, forgetting I was still on the line. I have to go, I said. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hung up before they could respond. Dad called 20 minutes later. Sophia. His voice was tight. We need to talk. Good morning, Dad. Amanda just called. She's very upset. I imagine she is, I said. She says you bought the beach house. That you own it now. That's correct. Why didn't you tell me? His voice rose. Why didn't you say something before I made that announcement? You didn't ask, I said simply. You've never asked about my life, Dad. Not once in the last 6 years. That's not true. When's the last time you asked about my work? I interrupted. About what I do for a living. About how I support myself. Silence. You haven't, I answered for him. Because you assume you know. You assume I'm still that directionless 22-year-old who dropped out of grad school. You've never considered that I might have built something. Achieved something. Succeeded in ways you didn't expect. If you just told me you were interested in the house. I wasn't interested as your daughter wanting a family heirloom, I said. I was interested as a real estate investor looking for a profitable property in a prime location. I made a business decision. The fact that the property has family history was actually a complication I had to set aside. A complication, Dad repeated. His voice was cold now. Yes, I said. Because that house represents my childhood too, Dad. All those summers you mentioned in your speech. I was there. But somehow in your mind it became Amanda's house. Her memories. Her inheritance. I was erased from that narrative. That's not fair. You just told 200 people that you're giving a $4 million asset to Amanda because she's responsible and successful, I said. What does that say about me? What message does that send? Dad was quiet for a long moment. I didn't mean it that way. Maybe not, I said. But that's how it landed. What do you want me to do? He asked. Nothing, I said. I don't need anything from you, Dad. I own 13 properties. I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I just want you to understand that your assumptions about my life have been wrong for a very long time. 13 properties, he said quietly. 13, I confirmed. Worth about 19 million combined. I started with a small condo 8 years ago. I saved everything from that bookstore job, bought the condo, fixed it up, rented it out. Used the rental income and equity to buy the next property. I've been building steadily ever since. Why didn't you tell us? I tried to, I said. Remember when I bought my second property? I called to share the news. You said, that's nice, and changed the subject to talk about Amanda's promotion. After a few more attempts, I stopped trying. I heard him sigh. Sophia, I have to go, Dad, I interrupted. I have a property manager meeting in an hour. But think about this. You made a promise you couldn't keep because you didn't do your due diligence. You assumed the house was still yours. You didn't check. That's on you, not me. What am I supposed to tell Amanda? Tell her the truth, I said. Tell her the house is gone and she'll have to find her own way. It might actually be good for her. The family group chat exploded within the hour. Messages flew back and forth. Most of them about me, very few to me. Amanda, can you believe what Sophia did? This is so typical of her. Mom, I'm very confused. When did you buy the house? Uncle Richard, wait, Sophia owns the Malibu house now? Aunt Susan, how does she have that kind of money? Cousin Jennifer, I heard she's actually really successful. Someone said she owns like a dozen properties. Amanda, that's ridiculous. She works at a bookstore. I muted the chat and went about my day. I had work to do. Monday morning, I got an email from my property manager. The beach house had a new booking. A family from Switzerland wanted it for 3 weeks in August. 21 days at $12,000 per week. $54,000. I approved the booking and smiled. That afternoon, Mom called. Can we talk? She asked. Her voice was small. In person. Sure, I said. When? Now. I'm actually outside your building. I looked out my window. Mom's car was parked on the street below. Come up, I said. Unit 3201. When she arrived, her eyes widened as she took in my apartment. The high ceilings, the modern kitchen, the views of the ocean. This is where you live? She asked. Yes. It's beautiful. Thank you, I said. Would you like coffee? We sat on my balcony, cups in hand, looking out at the water. I owe you an apology, Mom said finally. We all do. Hey, I said. We made assumptions about your life. About who you were and what you were doing. And we never bothered to check if those assumptions were true. No, I agreed. You didn't. Dad is devastated, she said. Not about the house, well, partly about the house, but mostly about realizing how wrong we've been about you. He should be devastated, I said. He promised Amanda something he didn't own. That's embarrassing. He wants to make it right. There's nothing to make right, I said. I bought a property. I own it. That's all there is to it. Mom was quiet for a moment. Amanda is talking about not speaking to you anymore. That would require us to be speaking now, I pointed out. We barely interact as it is. You're sisters. Biologically, I said. But we haven't been close in years, Mom. You know that. She nodded slowly. When did it happen? When did you become so successful? Gradually, I said. Over 8 years of hard work, careful investing, and learning everything I could about real estate. I made mistakes. I had properties that lost money. But I kept going. I built something real. And we never noticed. No, I said. You never did. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I'm so proud of you. I should have said it years ago. You should have, I agreed. Can we start over? She asked. Can you give us a chance to really see you this time? I thought about it. About all the years of being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. About the sting of Dad's announcement and Amanda's entitled expectations. But I also thought about the fact that Mom was here now, trying. Maybe, I said. But things are different now. I'm not the struggling kid who needs saving. I'm successful on my own terms. And I won't be treated like less than Amanda anymore. I understand, Mom said. And the beach house stays mine, I added. Non-negotiable. I understand that too. We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the ocean. Will you come to dinner this weekend? Mom asked. Just family. No speeches, no announcements. Just us talking honestly. I'll think about it, I said. She nodded and stood to leave. At the door she turned back. $19 million, she said. That's really what you're worth? Approximately, I said. It fluctuates with the market. She shook her head in wonder. My daughter, the real estate mogul. Your daughter who you thought worked at a bookstore, I corrected gently. Not anymore, she said firmly. I see you now, Sophia. I really do. After she left, I stood on my balcony and looked out at the ocean. Somewhere down the coast was the Malibu beach house. My house now filled with my memories and my future. I'd built an empire in silence. I'd succeeded without their approval or support. And now that they finally saw me, finally understood what I'd accomplished, I wasn't sure I needed their validation anymore. But maybe, just maybe, it would be nice to have it anyway. My phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. We need to talk. Please. I looked at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, okay. Coffee tomorrow. Your treat. As I could afford to be generous now. I could afford to give her a chance, give them all a chance to see me as I really was. And if they couldn't? If they went back to their old assumptions and dismissive comments? Well, I'd still have my 13 properties, my $19 million, and the beach house that should have been ours, but was now entirely mine. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't what your family gives you. It's what you build for yourself when they're not looking.
They didn't ask. They just decided. And like always, I was expected to nod, smile, and make it all work. My name is Rachel Connors. I'm 28 years old, a senior accountant at a firm. No one outside of finance has heard of, and I live a quiet life in a quiet building with no drama and no damage. I've built everything I have from the ground up: my degree, my job, my credit score, even my kitchen table. No handouts, no shortcuts. But if you ask my family, they'd probably say, I'm the cold one. Not because I've ever yelled or walked out or done anything cruel, just because I stopped cleaning up their messes. You see, I have an older sister, Erin, 2 years ahead of me, but somehow always 5 steps behind. Erin has a way of making failure look like tragedy and making everyone else responsible for it. Lost another job. The boss was toxic. Kicked out of another apartment. Roommates were jealous. Another missed bill. She's trying her best, and my parents, Carol and Frank, they never question it. They just pivot, rearrange, and if they can't fix it directly, they turn to me. You're stable, Rachel. You're lucky you can help. That was the phrase that followed me for years. help with the car payment, help with rent, help with bail, always help. And when I said no, the rare times I pushed back, they'd act like I was the one burning bridges. I learned early on my value wasn't in being loved, it was in being useful. But usefulness has limits, and they were about to find mine. Sunday dinner had a rhythm in our house, same casserole, same table, same undercurrent of pressure disguised as politeness. That evening, something felt rehearsed. Mom greeted me at the door with a smile too wide to be sincere. "You look so thin, sweetheart. Are you eating enough?" Dad didn't say much, just a nod and a distracted, "Hey, kiddo." Erin was already at the table, scrolling her phone, avoiding my eyes like a teenager called into the principal's office. I knew the signs. When my mother acted sweet and my father went silent, it meant they were about to tell me something they knew I wouldn't like. We made it through the salad. Mom complimented the weather like it was an achievement. Dad kept refilling his glass, and Erin kept picking at her food like it might bite back. Then Mom set down her fork, folded her hands on the table, and gave me that practiced smile she saved for requests wrapped in guilt. "Rachel," she began too softly. "We've been talking. Erin's had a rough time lately, and, well, she's going to be moving in with you for a little while. Just like that. No question, no discussion." She said it like she was offering me cookies. Like, of course I'd say yes. I felt the room pause like they were waiting for me to resist, waiting for the pushback they could call selfish. I looked at Erin. She glanced up quickly, then away. My dad cleared his throat, already bracing for the argument. Instead, I smiled. "Of course," I said lightly. "If it helps Erin get back on her feet, I don't see why not." The silence that followed was sharp. My mother blinked, caught off guard. My dad exhaled like he'd dodged a bullet. Erin leaned back in her chair, smug, creeping across her face like moss. None of them noticed how still I went after that. How quiet they thought I'd caved. But what they didn't know, what none of them had thought to ask, was that I hadn't lived in that apartment in weeks. And I had no intention of letting Erin or any of them move into a place that no longer existed. I didn't wake up one day and decide to lie to my family. It took years. Years of quiet disappointments, of guilt-wrapped favors and memory-hold sacrifices, of realizing that in my family, survival came with strings and being the strong one just meant being the most convenient to use. When I was 21, Erin's car got repossessed. She called sobbing. Said she couldn't get to her new job. Said this one was different. She just needed a little help getting started. My credit was clean. Co-signing felt like a small thing. She stopped showing up to that job 3 weeks later, missed the payments. Guess whose credit took the hit? At 23, Mom called me crying because the mortgage was past due. Dad had been laid off. Erin had moved back in. I wired $2,000 the next morning. No one thanked me. At Christmas, Mom handed me a mug that said "World's Best Daughter," and I almost laughed. At 25, Erin got a DUI. First one we knew about, at least. Dad asked me to keep it quiet, said it would destroy the family's reputation. I paid for the lawyer. Erin never said a word. A year later, when she got pulled over again and I refused to help, Mom called me cold. "You've never understood what it means to worry for someone you love," she said. "Erin's life is harder than yours." That was the moment I knew, not suspected knew. They didn't see me. They saw a function, a faucet they could turn on when something broke. A wallet that smiled. I started pulling back, politely declining, changing topics, saying, "I'll think about it" instead of yes, they noticed. And they didn't like it. One night, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment, the condo I'd bought without help, decorated on clearance sales paid for month by month with numbers and spreadsheets and quiet diligence. I stared at the front door and realized I didn't feel safe in it anymore. Because it wasn't mine when they wanted something. It was always ours. Just like my time, my money, my patience. So I made a decision. I called a realtor, sold the unit, quietly, legally. Without fanfare, I moved into a small rental on the other side of town. No one asked where, and I didn't offer it. I could have told them, but I didn't. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, out of preservation. Because sometimes when you grow up in a family that only remembers your usefulness, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is disappear. Just enough to breathe. The texts started on Monday. We'll bring Erin's mattress Saturday morning. Frank's loading the boxes Friday night. She's excited to finally have her own space. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They were speaking to a version of me that no longer existed. Each message assumed I would open the door, rearrange my life, absorb the weight without making a sound. They'd done it before. They just didn't know I had stopped listening. By Thursday, Mom was texting me daily. Let me know if you need anything cleaned before she moves in. Erin says she won't be a burden. She's bringing her own dishes. That one made me laugh quietly to myself over coffee. She hadn't washed a dish in her own apartment in years, but I let it all play out. I didn't push back. I didn't correct them. I waited Saturday morning. I left early. Coffee first, then a drive across town to nowhere in particular. I walked through a farmer's market I didn't plan to buy anything from. Stood in the sun longer than necessary. My phone vibrated in my pocket 3 times before I looked. Missed calls. Voicemails. I let the 4th call go through Rachel. It was Mom, but not her soft voice. The brittle one, the one layered with panic. "What's going on?" she demanded. "There's someone here. Some man. He says he lives in the condo. Says you don't live here anymore." I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it, the unfamiliar space, the missing certainty. "You didn't tell us," she snapped. "You never said a word." "No," I replied evenly. "I didn't." There was scrambling in the background, the rustle of bags. Dad's voice, sharp and low. "Erin saying something I couldn't hear?" "Rachel." Mom hissed. "What is this?" "I sold the condo," I said simply. "Weeks ago." "You what?" "I moved out." Quietly. I didn't think it mattered. No one asked where I lived, so I didn't say. For a moment, nothing. I imagined them standing on that porch, bags on the ground, arms crossed, realizing they'd planned an invasion and showed up at the wrong castle. Then Dad's voice cutting through. "You lied to us. You said she could move in," I said. "If it helps Erin, I don't see why not." I didn't say where. Another pause, a sharp inhale from Mom. And from Erin, finally. "So what? We're just... what?" Supposed to figure it out now. She sounded young when she said it. Not angry, just lost. And for the briefest second, I almost answered. But I didn't. Because here's what they didn't know. I hadn't changed the locks out of anger. I hadn't sold the condo to make a point. I did it because I was tired of living in a space that never felt mine. I did it because I deserved to walk into my own home and not brace for impact. And because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people who refuse to change is to stop making space for them. They thought that was the end of it. They were wrong. Because by evening they were standing at my door. I knew they'd come. Even as I sipped my coffee that morning, even as I let their voicemails pile up, I knew Mom wouldn't let it go. She'd dig or call someone or show up just to prove a point that no matter how far I moved, I was still reachable, still obligated. By sunset, the knock came. 3 quick-clipped hits. The kind you hear when someone's trying to stay polite but is barely holding it together. I looked through the peephole. Carol, Frank, Erin, and a trunk full of boxes parked on the curb like it was moving day. I opened the door halfway. "You found me," I said, flatly. Mom looked flushed, her lipstick faded and hair pushed back like she'd run her hands through it too many times. "We tried calling," she said, voice tight. We didn't think you'd be here." "It's my apartment," I said, but you said Dad's voice was rising now. "You said she could move in. Now we're standing here with all her things, and you're acting like we're strangers." I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I never said she could move in here. I said, "If it helps Erin, I don't see why not." That was at the old place, which, if you recall, I don't live in anymore. Erin stepped forward, then her arms crossed. Her cheeks were red, but not from embarrassment, from fury. "This is petty, Rachel. You always act like you're so above everyone. But this is just cruel." I tilted my head. "You packed up your life and drove across the city to move into someone's apartment that you didn't even confirm still existed. That's not cruelty. That's entitlement." Erin's voice cracked. "You're my sister." "Yes," I said. "Cool, and you've spent years confusing that with free housing." Dad stepped between us, his voice edged with warning. Enough, Rachel, we're not leaving. We've put up with a lot from you. You owe this to your sister. There it was. The word that always hung unspoken, owe, as if every dollar I'd paid, every hour I'd worked, every sleepless night spent solving problems I didn't cause, had been written down somewhere, part of a silent contract I never signed. I stepped back, picked up my phone. "What are you doing?" Mom asked, eyes narrowing. I didn't answer. I dialed 3 rings. Then 911. "And what's your emergency?" My voice stayed calm. "Yes, I have family members outside my apartment who are refusing to leave. They're not on the lease. They weren't invited. I'd like to report. Trespassing." Aaron's mouth fell open. Frank swore under his breath. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. "Rachel," she whispered, almost pleading, "you're calling the police on your own family." "I asked you to leave," I said. "You didn't. The dispatcher asked for my address. I gave it." Aaron's voice shook with rage. "This is going to ruin everything. Do you know what people will think of you? Do you know what they'll say?" "Yes," I said. "They'll say." I finally stopped opening my door. Mom blinked. Her voice dropped to something smaller. "You used to be kind." I didn't flinch. "You used to notice when I was hurting." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, packed with every ignored boundary, every swallowed word, every moment I'd said yes when I wanted to scream, "No!" A patrol car pulled up 10 minutes later. The officer stepped out tall and calm, her hand near her belt but relaxed. "Evening," she said. "We received a call about trespassing." I nodded. "That's me." She looked at my parents, at Aaron, at the car with bags still in the trunk. "Ma'am, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "This is our daughter," Frank said. "This is a family matter, and this is her residence," the officer replied, "which you're not allowed to occupy without permission." Aaron looked like she might cry. "Or throw something, or both. You're going to regret this." "Rachel." "No," I said. "I've regretted almost everything up until this point. This is the first thing I'm sure of." The next day, I woke up to 12 missed calls, 5 from Mom, 2 from Dad, the rest from numbers I didn't recognize, cousins probably, or family friends I hadn't spoken to since graduation. Then came the texts. "Why would you do this to your own sister?" "Your mom is devastated. Aaron's sleeping in her car." "Is that what you wanted?" I didn't reply. I just scrolled. Eventually I found it, a Facebook post from my mother. Public 3 paragraphs punctuated by heartbreak emojis and a photo of Aaron as a toddler. "We raised both our daughters to care for each other, but one of them has forgotten what that means. We're heartbroken that Rachel, so successful, so fortunate, would turn her back in our time of need. Aaron didn't deserve this. None of us did." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments from people I hadn't seen since I was 12. Calling me selfish, cold, entitled. It wasn't new, just louder. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, for the first time in my life, I posted back a thread. Simple, no flair, no hashtags. Screenshot the $2,000 transfer I made to cover the mortgage. Screenshot my name on Aaron's car loan, followed by the collections. Notice a photo of the lawyer invoice from her DUI case. A timeline of every one-time favor I'd agreed to since I was 21. The receipt showing the sale of the condo. And finally, a message I'd saved. One Aaron had sent me 2 years ago, calling me a boring robot because I wouldn't let her crash for a month. I ended with one line: "I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt." I turned off my phone after that. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need applause. I just needed quiet, and for once, I had it. That night, the apartment was still. No noise from the hallway, no buzzing phone, just the quiet hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of old pipes shifting in the walls. I made tea, chamomile. It wasn't for sleep. I didn't need help sleeping anymore. It was for the ritual. A soft cup held in both hands, steam rising like forgiveness I hadn't asked for. My phone lit up once. Mom, then again. Aaron, I didn't open the messages. I didn't have to. I knew the rhythm by now. Shock, anger, guilt, pleading. Always in that order. I blocked both numbers, not out of cruelty, not out of pride, but because not every door deserves to be knocked on forever. I walked out onto the balcony. It was cold, but not sharp. The kind of cold that reminded you you're alive. Below the city hummed along, people moving headlights, glowing someone walking a dog in a puffy coat, too big for spring. A neighbor 2 floors down waved when she saw me. I waved back. It was simple, that small gesture, but it was more real than most of the things I'd done out of obligation. Inside, I turned off the lights one by one, the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. No picture frames on the walls, no family photos, just quiet, just clean space. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter or broken, I just felt done. Done. Performing, done. Explaining, done. Being the spare oxygen mask for people who never learned how to breathe on their own. Somewhere out there, they were probably rewriting the story again, casting me as the villain or the cold one or the ungrateful daughter. Let them. I didn't come here to be loved. I came here to stop pretending I didn't vanish. They just told the story like I had, and now I've written it back. When I was 16, my parents gave my room to my pregnant twin sister. They said it was time I learned to grow up, so I slept in a tent, outside, behind the kitchen window where they served cake and giggled over crib colors. That winter was long, but it started much earlier than December. My parents always told the story of how they prayed for a child. One child, a girl, if the Lord allowed it. Brianna arrived first, pink-faced, perfect lungs, strong enough to make the nurse laugh. I came 4 minutes later, quieter, smaller, unplanned. They didn't tell that part. They just called me the bonus, the unexpected, the extra. When people saw us together, they'd say things like, twins. Oh, but they're so different. And my mother would smile and reply, yes, Brianna takes after me. That was her way of saying, this one belongs. That one, not so much. It wasn't just the words. It was in the way they dressed her in new clothes from the department store while I wore hand-me-downs from church rummage sales, in the way her name was always embroidered on things, pillowcases, backpacks, even Christmas stockings, and mine was sharpied on the tag. Brianna had tea parties and dance recitals. I had chores. They said I was more practical, like that was praise. But when you're 7, no one wants to be practical. You just want to be seen. I remember one Thanksgiving, she got a seat at the big table with the adults I was told to help Aunt Marla in the kitchen. That was the year I burned the sweet potatoes and got scolded, while Brianna was complimented on how nicely she folded her napkin. My father once said to me while fixing the gutter, "You're the kind of girl who'll get by just fine. You don't need all that praise stuff," but the way he said it made it sound like a consolation prize. The only person who ever spoke to me like I mattered was Grandpa James. He taught me how to bait a hook, how to change a tire, how to hold still when the world gets too loud. He'd say, "You've got more spine than the whole family combined, Claire, but you keep it quiet. That's power." I didn't always believe him, but I clung to his words like rope. He died when I was 14. After that, nobody called me Steel Girl anymore, not even in jest. A year later, they sent out a holiday card. Brianna stood between our parents holding a sonogram. Matching sweaters, matching smiles. I wasn't in the photo. But if you looked closely, bottom right behind the porch column, you'd see it, a blur of denim and a bent elbow, just enough to say, "We didn't forget you, we just framed you out." I was 16 when they told me, "Mom, Linda." Though I stopped calling her that out loud sometime around 12, stood in the hallway with a mug of decaf and that pinched smile she wore when she was about to say something she already knew you wouldn't like. She'd started using it on me more in those years, like she'd grown allergic to my presence, but didn't want to be impolite about it. "Claire," she said, "we've got news." Behind her, my father, Tom, leaned against the stair banister, arms folded like he was waiting for a sermon to end. He didn't speak, not yet. That was Linda's job. He just hovered the punctuation mark at the end of her sentences. "Brianna's expecting." I already knew the test in the bathroom trash, the secretive whispers on the landline, the way she touched her belly after dinner like she was waiting for music to start. It had all been there, I just hadn't said it aloud. Unlike them, I still believed some things deserved silence. "That's a lot," I said carefully. Linda waved the air like she was dismissing a mosquito. "It's a blessing, Claire." "She's 17, sure, but she's ready. They're getting married. Tom's calling the pastor this week." Tom nodded once as if to confirm that yes, the church basement was already booked, and no, my opinion wasn't required. Then came the part that mattered. "With the baby coming, we'll need space. Your room is the only one close to the bathroom." It makes sense. I stared at her. What do you mean? You'll need to pack up, she said. We'll move your things into the garage for now. The garage, I said, like I hadn't heard her. There's no insulation. It smells like fertilizer. She tilted her head like I was being unreasonable. You're old enough to manage. We've let you stay longer than most parents would, you know. Let me stay, as if my existence was a favor they'd extended past its due date. Brianna walked past at that moment, glowing like a lighthouse in one of Dad's old flannel shirts. She paused in the hallway, eyes wide and performative. You're not mad, are you? I mean, the baby's going to need a lot. She looked at me like I was supposed to say, of course not, and maybe cry or smile or hug her. Instead, I turned, walked up the stairs, and started packing. That night, I moved into the backyard, not the garage. They'd filled it with boxes for the baby shower, so I found the old tent from summer camp patched to tear with duct tape and set it up under the elm tree. The nights in Georgia are quiet in winter, but not silent. The wind has opinions. The house still laughed. Through the frost-bitten flap of nylon, I could see their kitchen lights. They passed casseroles back and forth like love letters, set up balloons, hung baby socks from string. No one looked outside. They gave me a tent so she could have a crib. What were they planning to give me if I stayed? The tent lasted 19 nights. By the end of week 3, my fingers cracked even when wrapped in gloves, and my homework pages curled from condensation. I still went to school, still brushed my teeth at the gym locker room, still told anyone who asked that I was just camping out for a bit until our cousins left town. No one asked twice. During the day, I walked. I couldn't stay in the yard, not with Linda constantly peeking out to make sure I didn't track mud near the patio. So I wandered the sidewalks, circling the square, stopping at the library when it opened. That's how I passed the bakery. It wasn't fancy. The window paint was chipped and the neon, open, flickered like it had a stutter, but the smell, warm sugar-burnt cinnamon rising dough, hit me in the chest like a memory from a better life. I stood outside longer than I meant to, watching the man behind the counter mop the floor with slow, even strokes. He noticed, opened the door with one hand still gripping the mop. You just window shopping? He asked. Or you lost? I hesitated, then said, neither. I was just walking. He looked me over, not in a cruel way, just observant. I must have looked terrible. Oversized, hoodie split lip, the kind of face that flinches before anyone raises their voice. You hungry? I nodded. He motioned me in, wiped his hands on his apron. Frank Delaney, owner, janitor, baker, hostage negotiator. You can sweep. I nodded again, then grabbed that broom. There was no speech about helping the less fortunate. No questions about why I looked like I hadn't slept in a bed in weeks. Just a broom, a cloth, and a simple instruction mop, front to back, never side to side. I worked every afternoon that week. Quietly, Frank didn't talk much, but when he did, it was plain useful. How to check yeast by smell. How to watch a customer's face to see if they liked what they were chewing. By Friday, he handed me a key. I got a cot upstairs. It's next to the sugar sacks and the window doesn't open. But it's warm and the roof doesn't leak. If you want it, I took it. The bed frame creaked. The mattress was thin, but it was the first night I didn't hear Brianna laughing through the kitchen wall. The first night I wasn't cold. And the first night in a long time I didn't feel like I was trespassing inside my own life. I stayed above the bakery for nearly 4 years. At first, it was just a cot and a shelf where I kept my books and my backpack. But Frank never asked me to leave, and I never gave him a reason to. I worked every morning before school and every evening after I learned how to braid dough, when to pull a pie before the crust lied to you, how to stretch your hands without breaking the gluten. Frank never wasted words, but when I messed up, he'd grunt and show me again. That was his way of saying, "You're not hopeless." I finished high school early, not because anyone pushed me, but because I wanted out of everything that came before. No prom, no senior trip, no pictures in the yearbook. Just a signature from the principal and a bus ride back to the bakery where Frank handed me a warm roll and said, "You're gonna need a suit for job interviews." He didn't offer to buy it. He just said it like fact, like weather. I enrolled in night classes at the community college, accounting first, then small business law, then supply chain. I worked mornings at the bakery, evenings at a diner, and weekends doing books for a friend of Frank's who owned a hardware store. I didn't have time for anything else. I didn't want anything else. By the time I turned 25, I had 3 certificates, 1 business license, and no debt. Frank offered to retire and sign over the bakery, but I said no. He earned that place. Instead, I saved every dollar. No vacations, no takeout, no nonsense. I lived like I was still in that tent behind the house because part of me believed if I stopped, they'd find me again, that someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "This isn't yours, you're just borrowing it." But I kept saving. At 29, I bought the house. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, nothing fancy. The porch leaned left, the floor creaked, the kitchen hadn't seen a working stove since the Bush administration, but it had walls and a deed and my name on it. Not, Frank's not. Tom's not, Linda's mine. I moved in alone with a mattress on the floor and 2 folding chairs from the bakery's back room. I ate dinner off a cardboard box and hung one thing on the wall, a photo of me and Grandpa James taken the summer before he died. He was squinting at the sun. I was holding a fishing rod too big for my hands, he'd told me once. One day you'll build something nobody can take from you. So I did, and I didn't tell anyone. It came on a Tuesday. I was sanding the windowsill in the front room when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Frank never dropped by unannounced, and the mailman left things in the box. Most people texted first or didn't come at all. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, impatient. I wiped my hands on my jeans, walked down the hall, and opened the door. There they were. Linda, Tom, Brianna, her husband, 3 kids, matching shirts. Linda was holding a Tupperware, the kind she used to deliver to church potlucks when I was 10. "Claire," she said brightly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "We heard you bought a house. We're so proud of you." Tom gave a stiff nod, then looked past me into the hallway like he was checking the condition of a rental. Brianna smiled wide and stepped forward, her baby on one hip, the other 2 clinging to her skirt. "This place looks so good. You've really done well for yourself." I didn't move from the doorway. Linda lifted the Tupperware. "We brought banana pudding. Thought we could catch up." "Catch up," I repeated. She laughed like I'd made a joke. "It's been too long, sweetheart. We've all missed you." I said nothing. The hallway behind me was still half painted. I could hear the fan running upstairs. A grocery bag sat on the counter with eggs and milk I hadn't yet put away. Tom cleared his throat. "Brianna's family's getting bigger. They're a bit tight on space right now. We were thinking." "We thought," Linda interrupted, smoothing her blouse, "that maybe it's time to let the past go. Start fresh. You've got all this room now, and well, family should be together," Brianna chimed in. "I mean, we could all help each other. Wouldn't that be nice?" I looked at their faces, smiling, expectant. And then I looked at the shoes on their feet. New clean, the shoes of people who hadn't walked through snow to get to school, who hadn't mopped bakery floors before sunrise or slept on sugar sacks while pretending it was a mattress. "I lived in a tent," I said quietly, "in your backyard." The smiles faltered just a little. "You knew," I said to Tom. "You saw me through the kitchen window." He didn't answer. "And now you want to live here?" "Like none of it happened." Linda's voice sharpened. "Claire, don't be dramatic. That was years ago." "You're right," I said. "It was." I stepped back and opened the door wider, not to let them in, to let them see. The bare walls, the scuffed floor, the quiet space I'd built without them. "You should go, Claire," Linda began. "We're trying to do what I said. Rewrite it." Brianna shifted the baby on her hip. "You don't have to be bitter." I almost laughed, but instead, I shut the door, not slammed, not with anger, just closed, firm. A banana pudding sat on my porch for 3 days. I left it there. Let the sun have it. 2 weeks after they showed up at my door, a letter arrived from a local attorney's office. I stood on my porch in the morning light, coffee cooling in my hand, reading and rereading the first line. This letter serves as formal notice of a legal petition filed by the Matheson family requesting shared claim to the residential property located at 144 Oak Lane. I sat down on the steps. Let the paper curl in the breeze. The legal language was cold, efficient. They weren't asking to be part of my life. They were asking for a piece of what I'd built on paper. They were suing me for my house. The next morning, I called Adele Watkins. Frank had given me her name years ago, told me, if anything ever gets ugly, she's the one you want. She was older, sharp-eyed, and didn't waste time. I met her in a small office above a notary shop that smelled like lemon cleaner and paper dust. She read the letter once, then again, slower. "They're claiming this was purchased with family money," she said. "It wasn't." "You sure?" I nodded. I worked for every dollar. No gifts, no loans, nothing in writing or in spirit. Adele looked at me for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a legal pad, and started asking questions. Birth dates, prior addresses, any known inheritance or assets. When she asked about my grandfather, I told her everything I remembered. The fishing trips the old van he used to take us to the lake. The tin box he kept locked in his closet that I was never allowed to touch. Was there a will? "I don't know," I said. "He died when I was 14. They told me he left everything to my parents." Adele leaned back, fingers pressed together. "Let me look into it." She called me 4 days later and told me to come in. When I arrived, she had a thin folder on the table and a look I'd seen before on Frank's face the night he found me sleeping behind the flour sacks. There was a will, she said. It had been filed quietly under an outdated name, James F. Matheson Sr., with a restricted access code that Adele had requested through probate court. It listed one beneficiary, Claire Elizabeth Matheson. The date was 9 months before his death. He left you everything she said. A modest trust, real estate stock, his war pension. I stared at the folder, but I never saw a dime. No, because your parents petitioned for temporary guardianship and assumed fiduciary control. You were a minor. They liquidated the assets and declared them absorbed into household debt. They spent it. She nodded. All of it. Most notably, 6 months after the liquidation, your sister's wedding was paid in full. Your parents purchased a new SUV and they refinanced their mortgage. I didn't say anything. Adele closed the folder. You have a case. Will it hold, with documentation? Yes, but it won't be pleasant. I don't need pleasant. She paused. You want to go after them? No, I said. I want what was mine. She nodded slowly, slid the folder toward me. They might not have thought you'd find out. I ran my hand across the cover. They thought I'd stay in the tent. The courtroom wasn't large, just a few pew-like benches, scuffed floors, and a judge who looked like she'd heard every kind of family lie already. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Adele beside me, calm as stone. Across from us were Linda and Tom, dressed like it was Sunday service, and Brianna, who looked everywhere but at me. Her husband sat behind them, chewing on his nails. The judge called the hearing to order. The petition for shared property rights was read aloud in monotone legal cadence, on the grounds that the defendant's current residence was acquired using liquidated family assets belonging to the estate of James F. Matheson Sr. That was the first time they said Grandpa's name out loud in that room. Tom flinched. Adele stood. Her voice was measured crisp. Your Honor, we submit into evidence the last will and testament of James F. Matheson, Sr., dated 9 months prior to his death, naming Claire Elizabeth Matheson as sole beneficiary of all liquid and assigned assets. She handed the folder to the bailiff. Further documentation will show the estate was appropriated by the petitioners during the defendant's minority, with funds traced to the purchase of a vehicle home, renovations and event expenses for Brianna Ann, Matheson's wedding. Linda leaned forward. That money was for the family. Claire was part of the household. We didn't steal it. Adele didn't blink. Claire was a minor, she was not consulted, and she never received notification of her legal inheritance. The judge flipped through the folder. Her brow furrowed once slightly. Tom spoke for the first time. We were told it was joint, that we were the executors. You filed as temporary guardians, Adele said, but you never disclosed the will's existence to the beneficiary. That's fraud. Brianna finally looked at me then. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't speak. I had nothing left to say to people who once looked through me like frost on a window. The judge closed the folder and looked at Linda. Did you inform your daughter of her legal right to this trust when she turned 18? Linda didn't answer. The judge turned to me. Miss Matheson, do you wish to file a counterclaim? I nodded. Once I do. A pause. Then, this court finds in favor of the defendant. All property rights remain solely with Miss Matheson. Restitution proceedings will begin within 30 days. The gavel came down like a door closing. Not slammed, just final. As we stood, Linda reached for my arm. I stepped back. Claire. she whispered. "We were just trying to do what's right for Brianna." I looked at her. "You did." Then I walked out and didn't turn around. The house was quiet when I got back. I locked the door behind me and slipped off my shoes, like I always did, even though there was no one left to track in mud. The late afternoon light spilled across the floorboards, catching the edges of unfinished trim and the slight tilt in the hallway. Imperfections I'd memorized, chosen. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Like a storm had passed without knocking anything over, just shifting the air and making everything sharper. Restitution would take months. Adele would handle the filings. I'd get some of the money back, though, not all. But it wasn't about the money. It never had been. I opened the closet in the front hall and pulled out a small cardboard box labeled Grandpa. Keep inside was the only thing I'd saved from the old house. Besides my birth certificate, a photo of Grandpa James and me taken when I was 8. We were standing in front of his truck, both squinting into the sun. He had one hand on my shoulder and the other holding a tackle box. I took the photo and walked to the living room. Above the fireplace was a nail I'd never used. I hadn't wanted to hang anything until I knew the house was truly mine. Now I did. I placed the frame carefully, stepped back. Then I reached into the box again and pulled out something smaller. His old navy dog tag, the one he used to wear like a keychain. I set it on the mantel beside the photo, then slid a small brass plate beneath it, something I'd had engraved weeks earlier before the hearing, before the paperwork. It read, "This house was built from silence, not from love, and that is enough." I didn't cry. There was nothing to mourn. They had taught me absence. They'd shown me how to vanish from photographs, how to go unnoticed at a table, how to live at the edges of a family without making a sound. And I had learned so well. I rebuilt a life from it. Later that night, I turned off my phone. I didn't need to read the messages. I knew what they'd say. Regret, guilt, twisted apologies wrapped in blame. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the wind move through the trees in the front yard. I wasn't waiting. No one was coming, but for the first time in years, I could finally hear myself breathing.